Our first speaker is Nicholas Gilleram, CEO of Aiden Automotive Technologies.
So I'm sorry if I'm boring anyone who've already heard this, but at least we had some technical problems in the morning, so maybe it will go better this time. I'm going to give a presentation which I call a perfect storm, because I think that's what's really brewing in the automotive industry and has been brewing for a long time, and especially around electric vehicles. I'll start with introductions, and then I'll describe why I think this is a perfect storm. And I'll end with Covisa's role and the opportunities and the great impact that I think Covisa can play here in this space. My name is Niklas. I'm the CEO of Aiden. As John mentioned, I previously worked at Volvo, and I have a long history at working in the automotive space, and I've always been working with software development. Currently, just pitching Aiden real quick. We're working on building actually a software-only solution enabling a connected vehicle ecosystem, and we're building a solution very much focused on GDPR and privacy-regulated personal data. And we're trying to just make sure that we build something based on the main premise of people actually owning and controlling their data, and enabling data consumers to define exactly what they want to communicate, and enabling OEMs to decide who and how they actually want to connect their vehicles. And please feel free to reach out afterwards or use the links if you're interested to learn more about Aiden and what we're doing there. So I said a perfect storm. The reason I think it's a perfect storm is actually automotive industry can be quite conservative and quite slow and sometimes really frustrating, but it's certainly not a boring world, because at the very least, I really must say I'm very sure that it's going to be an interesting couple of years ahead of us. It's been interesting for a long time now, because there's huge challenges ahead of us, and looking only in the electric space and electric vehicle challenges that we have, we actually have vehicles becoming increasingly software defined. People are changing their behaviors in terms of what they want from vehicles, and we see that software is becoming more and more important also for such fundamental things as battery management. And actually the whole challenge of building a car is much more a software problem than it ever has been before. And this might sound like a repeating record. I'm sure you've heard that before, but it's certainly one of the greater challenges from the OEM's point of view in electrification. And it's not a problem that traditional OEMs necessarily are best equipped to address. And I think most OEMs are aware of that. This is one of the areas where they really need to invest a lot of time. And at the same time, we have a greatly increasing demand for electrical vehicles. There's multiple forces at the same time pushing for more and more electrical vehicles. You've got obviously a growing environmental push. There's legislation push where even some cities around the world are saying that they will ban combustion engines from a certain time period. And at the same time, consumers, of course, want EV vehicles more and more, because let's face it, they're great fun to drive with great acceleration, instant acceleration, and great torque. At the same time, the automotive industry is very, very fragmented. Even the greatest, largest car companies are less than 10% of the market. So that means that it's not at all as with smartphones, where you have a couple of huge players like Apple or Samsung or the likes who actually control huge chunks of the market. In automotive, no one is able to actually dictate and set a standard in the same way that the could be done or can be done in the electronics industry. Another big shift, I would say, is that ownership and usage models of vehicles are changing as well. So you see a shift where instead of traditional ownership, more and more people are buying subscriptions. More and more car companies, a lot of car companies are trying out subscription-based models. And then, of course, you've got ride sharing or ride hailing models as well. And at the same time, the sales model is changing as well. So a lot of car companies are trying to go more direct to consumer. They're trying to get online sales of their cars, which of course also fundamentally changes the OEM perspective and also changes the dealer perspective, which means the whole network for supporting vehicles that have been sold. And fundamentally, the OEMs want to take a part of this new and growing value chain around vehicles. And I think they're all trying to get as large a piece of the pie as possible. And a consequence of that is that right now, as it has been almost always in automotive history, the OEMs are still mainly building their own proprietary solutions for anything EV. And certainly when it comes to connecting their vehicles and making payments available for EV, it's still very much fragmented by different ideas from different OEMs, and they're doing their own things. At the same time, from an infrastructure perspective, looking at power grids and charging stations and charging service providers, it's also a quite challenging future that we're looking at. Power production and the grids are already strained as it is today. And not only would power production and the grids themselves need to be upgraded, but we need more power production itself. I know as an example, in Sweden this winter, they actually started to run an old coal plant because in the wake of shutdowns of nuclear power plants, there just wasn't enough energy to go around, and that's without having a huge chunk of electric vehicles on the road. So you can just imagine what happens when we suddenly need to power a majority of cars with electric power as well. And this is, of course, ridiculous from an environmental point of view, but it's not getting better anytime soon. So power production will be a problem. And I guess recent developments over the last couple of months, and mainly in Europe, means that energy production is even more strained than before. The charging infrastructure also requires significant investment. I read an article a couple of weeks ago claiming that we need 65 million additional charging stations only in Europe. And at the current rate that we're building them out, it's going to take a couple of decades to get that built out. Obviously, that's something that needs to be built much faster. And building that charging infrastructure, of course, requires a huge investment. Power grids and charging is also highly fragmented. Basically, you have different networks in each country, and each country have at least a handful of different providers, and in some countries it's even in the hundreds. And obviously, here as well, companies want to take part of this new and growing value chain and want to get, especially when you need to make huge investments, of course, you're expecting to get huge returns. So here as well, I think the consequence is that we're getting proprietary disconnected solutions in charging. And the bottom line is that the pieces don't fit. Everybody's building their own pieces of Lego and they don't work very well together. I think everybody's first basic principle for two entities to be able to work together is that they're able to communicate, and that's really something that is lacking at the moment, I believe. So looking at what's needed, basically what we have is on a global scale, hundreds of different OEMs building hundreds of different cars. You've got thousands of different service providers in energy production and charging service providers across at least a handful of different markets. You've got North America, the European Union, and China as the largest ones, of course, but then you've got Japan, Korea, and the rest of the world. So all those different entities need to find some way of building something that actually work together. That's a fairly large problem to solve. That, of course, involves cross-company and industry collaboration. You need collaboration in data because you want to be able to connect with vehicles. And for charging, it's not only connecting when you're charging. I think it's might be even more important to be able to connect when you're not charging, so that you can actually communicate about where you should be charging, when you should be charging, what the cost will be, how you can pay, and who should pay, and so on. And then to actually process the payments and build out additional services around the whole charging ecosystem, of course, requires deep collaboration across all these different entities. To get that in place, I'm certain that we need a more collaborative and a more open and partnership focused approach. That's the only way that I can imagine that we ever will actually solve this and build something that actually scale. And that means we need to start focusing more on ecosystems and less on trying to build monopolies. An ecosystem is really defined by being a system where all the necessary entities, all the parties are able to live and thrive. It's something that needs to be balanced. You cannot have a situation where, I mean, it's just like the balance between predators and prey, or between animals and plants. If you have too many predators, there will be no prey, and in the end, everyone will starve. Same thing here. Business models and technologies that we build needs to be focused on growing and nurturing partnerships, really. And everybody needs to start focusing more on growing the pie instead of your slice, because right now everybody's destined to end up with 100% of their own pie, and that pie is very close to nothing, and 100% of nothing is actually still not very much to have. So the potential role I see of Covisa in this ecosystem is, I was part of Covisa in its earlier incarnation as Genevi, and as Genevi, we tried to build a common in-vehicle infotainment platform, and I think that most people would agree that we probably failed. We didn't really succeed. Solving this problem, getting this many entities to build something together, I think is orders of magnitude more difficult, but I'm actually more optimistic this time around, because the actual problem here is really to connect companies, to connect people. And I think Covisa has started to become this center where this complex web of entities can really connect across industries, and as opposed to the IVI problem where anyone actually could still build their own infotainment product and still be able to market it. Here, actually, no one entity will be able to build this and scale this by themselves. This problem is much more about the actual connections. And I envision that Covisa can do this by actually supporting real actual projects, where we try to bring together Covisa members from different industries, from OEMs, from cities to infrastructure, and actually start to build things. And I imagine that Covisa can both define what should be done and market projects internally. I think Covisa can play a role in basically in the center of this to advise its members, and basically I expect Covisa to be this hub where you kind of you're encouraged to talk to people, and as Covisa they will know that, hey, Nicholas, you should talk to this guy at Ford or that lady at Harman, and here's a problem for you to solve. And I think Covisa can be this seed, provide the seed and potentially even incubation of projects in this space. That way, I think we can actually focus more on action over talk. The previous incarnation of Covisa, when it was focused on infotainment, Genevi, was very much focused on writing specifications and standardizations and things like that, which is all good. I still think that's valuable to do. It's just that it's very slow, and I think we need to try to move faster. And when you actually build things, when you actually build products, that's when you really have the ability to have an impact. A lot of times standardizations and specifications then can tend to turn into paper products if you don't make sure that you follow it up with actual implementation as well. I believe that no one entity has any chance at all to solve all these challenges by themselves. And I think Covisa is likely the most natural umbrella organization for solving these problems that I can imagine. I'm not aware of any other or better entity. And I think Covisa has really a big piece of solving this huge puzzle, actually. That's it for me. I have no idea how we are on time, but I'd be happy to take questions if there's any questions.
Nicholas, you hit it spot on.
Okay.
So that was great, and thank you for that. Any questions from the audience? All right. Well, I think that's so no questions here on the chat window. Nicholas, thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the panel here in about an hour from now.
Okay,
great.
I'll mute and thank you very much, everyone.